Hello, Irene. It is so good to see you. It always is, but when there are these stretches of time when we each have the ability to address other things in our lives and then come back, I'm just so happy and joyful for the chance to connect with you again. So, hello.
Likewise, I actually especially excited today because if you notice, like Kat and I are showing up in a different way. It's still authentic, but I feel like it's gonna get more personal
Mhm.
and relatable, hopefully. So I'm really excited and at the same time anxious because we're showing up in this space with more of ourselves and with more personal stories and experiences. So I hope you join along for the conversation we're about to have today.
Yeah, so Irene, I know for the viewers and listeners, we don't interact and communicate all that much in between our recording sessions or our meetings. So, what's kind of lovely about that is I get to experience what Irene is saying in an unedited and spontaneous fashion, just like you, the listeners, might be. So, I do know that there's been some stuff going on your end, Irene, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so just to keep everyone in the same loop, we started the conversation with how I had a wedding in the Philippines as well, and how I had to explain to family and friends that I'm actually already married, but we're celebrating another time with people in the Philippines. And the questions that I got were like, "Oh, so you have friends? And who did you celebrate with? Like, who was your entourage and all that stuff?" And I'm like, "I have been here for over 10 years, so yes, naturally, I have friends." So today is a story will bring everyone along through my journey of developing friendships, the challenges that come with it, and perhaps the conversations that ended relationships.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the topic of adult friendship is something that we don't often talk about. I think we all know we make friends through school, we make friends through work, but how to sustain the friendships over time and how to start new friendships or end friendships if they no longer serve you. Like those are all things that as we evolve into more and more of ourselves or we change and our priorities may change and our values may shift. Those are all things that I don't know if people really talk about, or at least it definitely can be talked about more. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to hear this. Yeah.
you know, it's interesting you mentioned adult friendships because I've also been reflecting about childhood friends. And when I was in the Philippines for a few months to prepare for the wedding, I've had the chance to reconnect with childhood friends. And I'm very grateful for those because, like, even if it's been years since we've spoken last, I still feel this sense of belonging, a sense of camaraderie, and a sense of
Hmm.
wanting to connect, right? Despite the journeys or individual journeys like that could take us to different places, different career paths, and different phases in life. I have kept in touch with them. A few of them actually I do have like weekly back-to-back calls, and that's one of the things that I actually lamented when I moved to the States, or like I felt like I didn't belong to a group and I missed those, right? So when I first moved here, I was a little lost um, because these, I think, childhood friendships are friendships that you formed before you, learned to be jealous, before you learned how to lie, before you learned all of the things, your exposure to the world. So these are very precious relationships that it's like you just want each other well. I think one of the conversations that I've had when I was in the Philippines was that my friend said, "All I want for my friends is that they be happy," and like that's so wholesome and genuine, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I've actually been listening to this book. It's called The Five Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. It's a relatively recent release, but he talks about one of the types of wealth is social. And what you're saying really kind of resonates with what he touches on. But the idea that when we're looking at our friendships and we're looking at our life, like our relationships and the ones that bring us joy and value aren't necessarily going to be the ones that are transactional. And we, as a society or as a culture, might be tempted or feel like we have to do more and, have relationships that are double duty, where you're a friendly, but you're also like making connections and whatnot. But kind of dialing it back and really taking a high level view of how does all of the ways that friendship really supports you and showing up, not just to like figure out what you can get out of a situation, but being there and treasuring those connections and remembering kind of how how it makes you a better person.
Yeah. So I think it was challenging for me to make friends in the US because, well, there's a lot of cultural differences. I grew up in the Philippines with a lot of guy friends, so they were like brothers to me. I mean, arguably, some of them, I learned later on, they came out as gay. So I was basically surrounded by either guy friends or gay guy friends. And, like a selected few female friends. And so when I came to the US, it's like, how do you say this? I naturally relate with men more, but I did not realize that it's different here because as a single female, I think it's easy to assume that it's not just a platonic relationship that
Mm,
people are looking for. Like
hmm.
there's this one guy that I met through a friend of mine, and okay, so we'd be hanging out, we would have meals together. And it's not like I would make him pay for my meals. But one time I was sharing that I was seeing someone, and the response that I got was, "So why are you here?" A- a- And and me not understanding what he meant, my response was, "Why not?"
Hmm.
It's like if you look back at it, it's like, oh, did he assume that we were on a date?
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, yeah. And those wires, I think, are, I don't know. I mean, I've only existed in the American culture space, but I definitely can relate. Like, I think that even if you're an American born female or woman, you have experienced those kind of situations where you think, oh, like, is that how you feel? And I kind of don't like that it for almost once you experience that once, it almost forces you into this headspace of I have to be guarded, I have to be a little cautious, I have to be very forthright because I don't want to mislead anybody. Or at least that was how I've had to navigate it since I had similar experiences where you think you're friends and then there's some awkwardness because maybe the expectation or the assumption was different from the other party.
Right. I don't think I made any indications that it was more than friends. It might be a cultural difference. And I know I'm not alone because I've spoken with, say, someone from China also who was like, I went out with someone and I had to ask him if this was a date specifically because I think for us, you need to tell us specifically. We don't just make assumptions like that. So
Ah, yeah.
that's that's the complications of making friends with the opposite sex.
Mm,
But it's not like female friendships are any easier either. Like you mentioned transactional relationships earlier, and I the first time I moved to the US, I'm in New York, right? So naturally you're gonna meet a lot of different personalities from different walks of life, which I found very interesting because it's diverse. It's all new to me. I'm learning a lot. I'm meeting a lot of people. It's very exciting. But with that comes a lot of people who are also opportunistic. Uh,
mm,
Especially if you are someone who's just like looking to connect with people, like look, you're casting your net wide. You want to be warm, you want to be welcoming because that's a culture that I come from, and you're hoping to meet people like yourself who might also give you a sense of home or like make you feel the way that you would want people to feel when you meet
mhm,
them. And so I it's hard to vet until you're actually deep in the relationship, right? So you hope to nurture these relationships and build these personal connections. Unfortunately, I have had to also sever those relationships because they become transactional. And I mean, in fact, one person even referred to me as a resource. And like, if that isn't telling of how that person
mm,
feels about me, like, I don't know what is.
mm, mm. I'm curious, what spaces Like, have you noticed a pattern of kind of the spaces or the context where you met the people that you've distanced yourself from, or you've kind of noticed that things have not evolved in a way that you'd like? Were these former coworker, industry colleagues that you became friendly with? I'm just, yeah, I'm kind of curious if you've noticed anything about kind of the evolution of certain and the trajectory of certain things.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question. In this case, it was actually family.
Ah,
Yeah. So I don't want to spook anyone out, but with relationships, the more that you build trust, right?
mm,
Um, the deeper the relationship gets, but it's also unfortunately the people that you trust the most who can hurt you the most. And that's just the nature of it, right? Because
yeah.
that's part of risking yourself out there in the hope that you could deepen the relationship.
Hmm.
Um, but I do so, I put myself out there, I take that risk knowing that there's a risk.
Hmm.
Um, but I also pull back once I see that the risk that I've taken or the trust that I have put out there is no longer honored.
Mm, absolutely. I mean, I almost feel like that's biological, right? Like when you touch a hot stove, you're not going to put your hand back on the stove. So, of course, like to expect otherwise, I think is counterintuitive. Like that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I feel like I've given it a lot of time. So I this might be different from person to person and I don't know what your perspective is, but I feel like I give my relationships enough time so that I can also see the person grow. But at some point, like if you've given it enough time and you don't really see changes, um, then you get to decide whether to give this any more time. I
Yeah.
guess the other consideration is also like, do you even have a conversation with this person? Is this person worth having a conversation with? Can they handle the conversation?
Mm, mm. Yeah, very true. And like the context in which you know this person or relate to this person or have to see this person might also be a huge factor. Like if it's someone you can generally avoid, then you may have certain options available, but I can see how, like if it's family and you know you're going to see them again, you have to tackle it and approach it in a way that accounts for that versus like, former college friend that you no longer jive with. And if you wanted to, you probably could avoid crossing paths with them.
Yeah. It's funny, yeah, you mentioned that because like another friend of mine and I were having a conversation around boundaries, and somehow, I hear this school of thought where like maybe we pushed the pendulum too far and like, oh, we're setting boundaries and we're just cutting people off left and right. But I feel like it is important to set boundaries. What am I call this? I'm trying to paraphrase what Brene Brown said about this. I hope I give it justice. But basically, what she said was that the people who complain when you set your boundaries are the people who have been benefiting when you didn't have any.
Ah, yes, That- that's good. But that's so true. Like they're wishing they still had access to something that was making you uncomfortable. And so when you push back, they're like, what? So yeah, I love that thought.
Right.
Very
And
true.
and I think one of the things that I also want to highlight in this experience is that when you set your boundaries, it's not going to be perfect, right? Especially if this is your first time setting a boundary, it may feel very abrupt. It may feel like, oh, you didn't do that with so much grace and tact. But like, if the objective that I want for myself is to be away from this energy and this mess, and I just want my peace, I am willing to do whatever it takes for me to achieve that, whether that's just abruptly cutting off that relationship without any explanation. I don't owe anyone an explanation at this point, right? Because like these are the tools that are available to me. This is what I am capable of. I'm sorry that you didn't get the explanation. I'm sorry that you didn't have a seamless process, but my priority right now is me. That's part of setting boundaries.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, two things are coming up for me as you're saying this. And one is this phrase of like every no is a yes to something else. So you're saying, I am not going to accept this, is you saying, I'm yes to prioritizing your needs and yes to self-care or yes to your mental health. Like I think a lot of times in any boundary situation, but that feeling of saying no can feel really hard and really messy. And just pinning it to like the flip side of that, like what is this saying yes to can help. It certainly helps me feel better about saying no in the first place and being messy about it. It's like, even if it's imperfect, I am making progress and taking strides to establish and show up for this priority of my mental health or my state of being.
Yeah, and I'm also cognizant of when the roles are flipped and I am suddenly on the receiving end of somebody not wanting to be around me. I am cognizant of that. It's happened to me. I'm not perfect. I have not always been a good friend. There are certain things that I might have done, might not have done that might have also like affected other people. And I fully respect people stepping away from me because I might not be good for them at some point, even if I didn't get an explanation. I fully respect that. And in fact, like I wish those people well, like, I respect them for stepping away from me. Because if that is what you needed in that moment to do good by you and to grow as a person, maybe we're not in the same paths, then please, please do so. Like
Yeah,
it's the same.
yeah, it's a really good point. Like the kind of the carry-on effect of setting a boundary is you also have to be give people grace when they set boundaries. And if you're only setting boundaries for yourself and you're not respecting other people's boundaries, it's sort of hypocritical. So yeah, I love that you pointed that out, that you have to kind of embrace the whole mindset of being okay with someone setting a boundary that works for them and respecting that and not taking offense and not, and giving them the space that they may need and meeting them where they are.
Yeah. And there's so many personalities in New York that I've met. And I think one of the themes that comes to mind is peer pressure. You would think peer pressure, like I'm thinking about your daughters right now, especially as they grow older, they're going to go to college, they're going to meet new friends, or they're going to be put in situations where, oh, like we're in college, we have to do cool things. And there might be some personalities that are going to peer pressure them into doing things. So, what I want to put forth out here is that remember that the person who is peer pressuring you into doing something fun but risky are not going to be the people who will take accountability for when you have to face the consequences of what they pressured you into, because that accountability falls on you.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit because I do think that you have to live through or depends on on the person and how much you know them. I'm thinking of one friend in particular who, or a group of friends, and they're super fun. And maybe peer pressure isn't the right word. So I want to, because I'm thinking about situations where they kind of there's like a egging on of something that I might be afraid to do,
Mm,
but then it's actually maybe they know me well enough to know that you actually are just afraid because you're afraid to look silly or you're afraid to fail, and they're kind of nudging me forward in a healthy way. So I don't, maybe that's not peer pressure in the same context that you're talking about it, because I guess I want to kind of distinguish between those different types of scenarios where you might have friends that are egging you on to do something that feels uncomfortable, but it's because they know and love you and they want to push you forward, versus there might be people that are egging you on towards something that isn't healthy for you. And if you've articulated, like, no, this is not healthy, this is not what I want, and they still persist, then, that is definitely not the kind of friendship or relationship that will lead you down better roads. Does that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little more, or tell us a little more about like how you've distinguished or what you've experienced recently that has pulled you more into the camp of like the the negative peer pressure, and what are
Okay.
you choosing to do about it?
yeah, to your point, like we never know whether it's good or bad for us until we have to face the consequences of it. And the difference is I have had friends who were there for me. I'll give you an example. So we went on a surfing trip with my friends. I was in my teens then. And if you're unfamiliar with the terrain of the sea for surfing areas, you don't swim in surfing areas. It's very
Mhm.
dangerous. I did not know that. I went swimming and then I was trying to get back to shore. I was swimming. I was like, I am farther from the shore than my starting point. And so I started calling for my friend. I was like, I need help. Mind you, she is way leaner than me. It's like the waves could have easily pulled her, but she walked over, and we walked together back. I could have lost my life then and there. So these are
Mm.
the friends who I would say that she put herself at risk too, right? Like we can establish that. Like these are the friends who, when you get into trouble, they're gonna look out for you because that's what
Mhm.
friends do. On the other
Mhm.
hand, when you have friends who peer pressure you, let's say that's drinking or whatever, something, you know, what young people do.
Mhm.
And then when it's time to face the consequences, they would disappear. So those, I mean, when it comes time for accountability, that's where I differentiate. It's like, yeah, that's not a good friend. And what's the next step here if I were to continue this relationship? I have actually had an instance like this, and I thought, well, the mature way to go about it is to actually have a conversation about why I am upset and how I feel betrayed, just to lay the cards on the table. And with the hopes of like just understanding why they did what they did, or like if we saw similar things or if we experienced the same things.
Mm.
Because I feel like even if you did or like did not take accountability in that moment, at least we could talk about it and process it, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
in my experience from that specific example, I had a friend who lied about her version of events. And how do I talk about this? I clocked the lie because there were details of her version of events that were incongruent when we had spoken about the events in the past. And the
Mm.
details of those events were crucial to why I feel betrayed. So, how do you move
Mm.
forward from a relationship like that? I clocked it then, but I didn't say anything because I feel like, especially when you're dealing with liars, if you bring it up and you challenge it, then they're gonna double down on their story, and you're only gonna get confused. The way that I have always done this, and this is my way of protecting myself, is just to let the stories unfold. Because like you don't really get to know someone until it's you've known them over time, and it's the
Mhm.
consistency of their character and their stories that I can rely on. So like
Mhm.
liars will keep changing versions of their stories, and I just let things unfold. After that conversation, I felt like, what am I supposed to do with this relationship? Because we can't lay our cards on the table. Instead of being honest about things, she chose to lie about it.
Mm.
So I said to myself, maybe this is the how far our relationship is going to be. It can't get any deeper. Like this is as far as it can go. But it's similar to, like, say for example, you have a married couple, and someone cheats on the other. And perhaps the aggrieved spouse confronts the cheating spouse. It's like, hey, are you cheating on me? And the cheating spouse would deny because it's the practical way of doing things. You can't get caught unless you admit to your guilt or your guilty doing. But deep down, like, the aggrieved party knows that there's something going on behind the scenes. You can't really pretend to keep moving forward with your relationship. You're naturally going to withdraw. And so it not
Mhm.
only is this relationship going to stay stagnant, it's just going to deteriorate from then on because you're going to withdraw. Because how do you move forward from that if you already had the conversation so that you can possibly resolve things from the root of it? What's the recourse?
Yeah. Yeah. What's fascinating is, as you're talking, I'm thinking about like in raising my girls and helping them establish quality friendships and discern between things that people that make them feel good and people that are supportive of them versus the opposite. Like you said, I think that it's almost like a how many strikes are you going to give someone? Because maybe one situation was a misunderstanding, or you can kind of try to, depending on the gravity of the situation, but like if someone has a different recollection of events versus yours, like maybe, okay, we can let two different agree to disagree. But if this is a repetitive behavior and you notice that this is not making you feel good and you're withdrawing from the friendship, it's no longer bringing you joy or making you feel secure about yourself, making you feel like enriched and enlivened, then all signs point to like, why am I doing this? And and maybe it's time to move on. So it's fascinating that like just kind of a reminder, I get a reality check that all of these things still happen throughout your whole life. Like not just when you're in seventh grade or 10th grade or, you know, when you're in college, that these decisions and the way people show up and how we get smart with ourselves to recognize things, those are those are ongoing. Those are ongoing.
Yeah. And perhaps one thing that is worth bringing up also, like especially for women, is that uh, female relationships are definitely different from male relationships. Sorry, male friendships, because we tend to be more personal. We talk about like details that like men not normally wouldn't. I don't think men talk to each other like that, like we do. And so there could be a tendency to lean on the other for emotional support. And when it's constant, it's like, oh, like, one drama after another. I don't think we realize the toll it takes on us, like the listeners or the healer, like, because number one, like, what does that have to do with us? you know? So I wish I had known that when I was younger, that I don't, other people's problems are not mine. I don't have to like welcome these conversations. And I learned this as you were going through the coaching program. Like I had more of an awareness. I'm like, oh, whenever these friends talk to me about their things, it's like I am actually working because this is like a coaching session without realizing it. Like those
Yeah.
friendships that have been grandfathered in. And
Mm.
so mm, the more that I learned about what we do as coaches, I'm like, the more that I realize I really have to like put a stop to this.
Mm. Yeah. Especially, I can imagine, like, if it feels very one way, like, if they're offering you the same level of support and feedback and encouragement and thought provocation, then it could be a symbiotic relationship. But when it does turn very one way and it's exhausting to you, and in a friendship context, especially a long one, or a family context, it could also feel like you're being taken for granted or taken advantage of. Like this is a skill set that I have that is takes effort and intentionality and time, and like you are accessing this and relying on me to give it to you for free. And not to like that's terrible because we touched on transactional and I don't want to always add that, but there's just that level of awareness that probably isn't being introduced on their end where like I would never ask a chef to do all the cooking or like cook a meal for me without acknowledging at least that is this something you want to do and does this feel healthy? You know what I mean? Like I don't know. That's just what's kind of popping into my head right now.
It's funny you mentioned that because like there are certain examples that came to mind as you were talking about that. People usually come to me about their relationships, right? Like that's usually where a lot of personal conflicts arise, and so we would end up talking about it, like because she's in distress, and then the next day I would check in. So how are you guys? And then the response that I would get is like what? Like as if we didn't just talk about it the night before, or as if they don't have problems because like the perception that she wants to maintain for herself is that like they're fine. She doesn't have a problem. Like, she's like pristine.
Mm,
For me, it's like number one, I have nothing to gain from this. If you're concerned about privacy, honestly, anyone who's gone through coaching and who's a coach know that the details don't matter. We don't actually care about the details, right? So I don't need to know that. I just need to know that it's been resolved. But I suppose she's because for me, when I open to friends about it and when I involve you in the process, I would give you closure so that you're not worried about me. Like, oh,
mhm.
this is how I want to end it on a positive note. I want to close it out and tell you how we resolve things and where we're at right now. Right? I mean, I think that's only fair. Like, especially if I have nothing to gain from this financially, emotionally, mentally, or even
Yeah.
like my time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's almost this element of gaslighting, like low grade gaslighting, when someone behaves in a way that doesn't acknowledge the intimacy or the context that you shared immediately prior to that or preceding it. You know what I mean? Like it, I, it's a strange dynamic, but it definitely doesn't honor what you've brought to the table and the way that you held space for them and the way you supported them. And it's kind of dismissive if they don't even like acknowledge it appropriately.
Right. And so this is not to say that to judge these people, like you said, like there's a difference in like what we can offer versus what they can offer. I'm sure they have something to offer in a different way. But I guess the point here is that if they are not on the same level as you, like, because you can't expect everyone to think the way coaches do either, right? Like, I
Hmm.
can't expect my husband to speak to me with such an emotional awareness and maturity that like that would I would receive the same conversation if I were to speak with Kat or another coach that I have worked with before, or even a therapist. It's
Hmm.
impossible to expect that of people, but you can see those who are willing to try, those who are willing to listen. Like I mean,
Hmm.
it's definitely a struggle with my husband too, but like it takes more time, but we are able to get there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you are not trying to set this high bar for how people are supposed to react in a certain situation, but there's a give and take. And if you're feeling repeatedly like someone isn't, I don't know, I guess appreciative, or the emotional dynamic just it's more draining than filling, it is definitely time to reevaluate and figure out, is this something that needs to be kept in my life in the same way going forward?
Yeah. And it's a great way to, I guess, segue into another point that I want to make is that there is a difference between people who are lost and who are trying and who are struggling versus people who have made a choice, right?
Hmm.
Like there are definitely bad actors out there. There are definitely those people who choose to lie because that is a choice.
Hmm. Yeah, that is of, and that distinction is so important because I also think, like you and I know this from coaching, but you can't coach someone who doesn't want to be coached, who's not ready to be coached, or who's unwilling to be coached. That so similarly, like if someone's made a choice to act a certain way versus maybe not knowing and or lacking awareness or being ignorant to what's possible, like there's a huge difference between those two. And that's applicable to a lot of contexts, but definitely in friendship and the way people show up. Like, yeah, it's definitely relevant.
Yeah. And I'm especially protective of the people who are kind and who are really learning the tools to use it for the good because I feel like there are also people who are wolves in sheep's clothing who will learn the tools for their advantage to manipulate people to show that they like they are a certain way but like they really have nefarious intentions or there's just something that they just want to learn how you operate so that they can use it to their own advantage.
Yeah. All of this talk of bad actors and, nefarious behaviors, I I'm feeling kind of compassion or just for your situation. I don't know exactly the details of what you've been having to deal with, but I I'm sure it's not easy. And so just putting that out there that like I applaud you for doing the work and recognizing when something isn't good for you and taking the steps to kind of figure out the best path forward. But I know it's not hard. And so I'm here for you.
I actually don't feel that way anymore. Like perhaps there was a time when I did, but I've sat in the feeling long enough to be ready to talk about this
Oh,
in our
good,
podcast in
good.
such a public platform. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want people to know that you can be kind, but you can also be strong. I am kind, but I'm not stupid. I am kind, but I'm not vulnerable. I am kind, but I'm not weak. So,
Hmm.
kindness is a choice. It's not easy because you have all of these actors out there. The world isn't exactly rainbows and butterflies and rabbits. Like it's tough out there. But I know my values. I stand behind them, and I do the work. So I can also, if there's anything, this is for people who are struggling to be kind in a world that's very chaotic. So there you can have that duality of like you're kind and you're trying to do the right thing, where while there are pressures all over you to not do the kind thing, to do the practical thing, to sell your soul out, to sell your integrity.
Mm-mm. Or to be so quote unquote kind that you are actually doing yourself a disservice. Like you're setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. There is no that is fundamentally unsustainable and unkind to you when you are not respecting your own feelings about a situation, your own moral code, your own sense of integrity, like you said. Like I'm not gonna lie for someone. That's just that those kind of things. Like if someone's putting me in a situation where I have to lie for them, that's not great. And I don't like that's something that I hope my daughters learn not to stand for. You know what I mean? You have to, your word and your integrity is kind of the most important thing at the end of the day. But yeah, like, yeah, you have to do hard things. And, and yeah, I'm not, it's, I kind of lost the thread there, but yeah, tacking on to what you were saying, there's this range of things. And I love that takeaway.
I hope this was very eye opening. I hope it wasn't too heavy. That was not my intention. I do feel like there's a lot of like golden nuggets to be picked out here. And if there's anything that I want people to take away from here is that like if you ever feel that you might be the problem because you're losing your friends left and right, I think the most important relationship that you can ever have is the one that you have with yourself. That supersedes any other relationship you can ever have, even if that's with your family, with your parents, even a significant other. Like your relationship with yourself and your values is the most important.
I love that. Thank you, Irene. Thank you for showing up so vulnerably and with honesty and emotion. And yeah, I appreciate you.